You're about to hear the footsteps before you see the blade. You're standing in a corridor that smells like cold stone and old smoke, where the air is too still and every sound travels too far. Somewhere nearby, a door opens, then closes again, slowly, as if the room itself is choosing when to breathe. You don't know what day it is. You only know that the waiting has weight, and it presses down harder each hour. The guards won't meet your eyes. The prayers are spoken like warnings, and the silence, God, the silence, feels less like peace and more like a decision that has already been made. Now pull back. The place is the Tower of London, and the year is 1536. The woman is Anne Boleyn, once crowned Queen of England, once the most talked-about figure in Europe's courts, now reduced to a prisoner whose very name is spoken carefully, as if it might cut the tongue. She has been arrested on charges that sound too monstrous to be real and too convenient to be accidental. Adultery, incest, treason. Within days, the men accused alongside her will be condemned, some executed so quickly the ink on their records barely dries. Anne will be tried too, but the trial will not feel like a search for truth. It will feel like a performance where everyone has memorized their lines except the person meant to die at the end. And the strange paradox, the question that haunts every retelling, is not simply whether she was guilty. It's something colder. How does a kingdom turn a queen into a spectacle without ever admitting it needed her gone? How does justice become a machine that keeps moving, even when the parts no longer make sense? In Anne Boleyn's final days, the sword is not the cruelest thing waiting for her. The cruelest thing is the uncertainty, engineered, maintained, and sharpened like a weapon you never see. Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from. Truly, it still amazes me that one woman's final days can echo across continents, centuries later. At first, she is not taken to a dungeon. That detail matters, because it's part of the psychological design. Anne is lodged in rooms she once used as a queen, spaces with history in the walls, places where she would have stood at windows and looked out over London as if the city belonged to her. Now those same windows look different. The river still moves, the gulls still cry, the barges still pass like they always have, but nothing outside is hers anymore. The normal life of the world becomes its own kind of torment. It continues. It doesn't pause for her terror. It doesn't even acknowledge it. She is guarded, but not roughly handled. She is treated with a formality that almost feels respectful, and that's the point. Brutality would give her something solid to hate. Formality keeps her off balance. It suggests rules. It suggests fairness. It suggests that if she just explains the right thing, the right way, someone might listen. It keeps hope alive long enough to hurt. When people later imagine the tower, they imagine iron chains and screams and rats. Anne's suffering is quieter. It is the slow unraveling of the mind when the future is withheld like food. She is not told what will happen next. She is not told when she will be questioned again. She is not told if the king, her husband, her maker, her destroyer, has already decided, or if she is still a piece on a board being moved by other hands. This is not simply imprisonment. This is controlled disorientation. In those first days, Anne cycles through instincts like weather. Defiance comes first, sharp and almost automatic. She is Anne Boleyn. She has faced down bishops and ambassadors. She has outmaneuvered enemies who underestimated her. She has been called arrogant, but arrogance at court is often just survival worn like armor. She asks what she is accused of. She demands to know who is speaking against her. She insists on being heard. But each demand meets the same invisible wall. The people who answer her do so in careful phrases. The people who don't answer her do so with their eyes lowered, as if looking directly at her might become an accusation in itself. Then there is disbelief, the kind that makes reality feel staged. Not because she thinks herself innocent in every possible way. History rarely gives us saints or monsters, only humans, but because the charges are designed to be impossible to refute. They aren't ordinary sins. They are the kind of crimes that corrupt the body and the bloodline. The kind that, once spoken aloud, stain everything around them. Incest, treason. These words aren't just legal categories. They're weapons meant to make the accused unrecognizable, even to those who once loved them. And then there is fear, but not the clean fear of death. It's the fear of not understanding the shape of what's coming. Fear of being forced to participate in her own undoing without ever being told what the script requires. Somewhere in the tower, the machinery begins turning. Witnesses are gathered, stories are arranged, dates are placed into mouths that will repeat them until they sound like memory. The Crown has always understood something the average person does not. Truth is not simply what happened. Truth is what can be made to appear inevitable. Anne, in her chamber, begins to notice the rhythm of footsteps outside her door. She learns which guard walks heavier, which one pauses longer. She listens for changes the way a sailor listens for wind. This is what happens when power is stripped away. The mind becomes a specialist in scraps. A glance, a delay, a tone, a cough that sounds rehearsed. A servant who used to chatter now speaking only when spoken to. And the servants, those near her, those allowed to enter, become part of the torment too, even if they do not mean to. Some of them are loyal. Some are frightened. Some are loyal but frightened, which is a different thing entirely. They fetch water. They bring food. They adjust her clothing. They speak as if the walls have ears, because the walls do. Everyone knows that what is said near Anne could travel outward, become evidence, become rumor, become a nail hammered into a coffin. Anne begins to talk more than she means to, not always, not constantly, but in bursts. There are moments when she laughs, too loudly, too suddenly, because the alternative is screaming. There are moments when she speaks quickly, as if speed might outrun fate. And there are moments when she grows strangely calm, the way a person does when the mind cannot carry fear without breaking. This is where the tower becomes not only a prison, but a mirror. Everything Anne believed about influence, charm, intelligence, even love, reflects back at her with a cruel clarity. She used to understand men like Henry. She used to know how to move him with absence, with attention, with a word spoken at precisely the right angle. Now she has no access to him. No letters that will reach him unfiltered. No audience. No private moment where she can remind him of shared history. The Queen, whose entire rise depended on being seen and heard, is now reduced to waiting for messages that do not come. And when messages do come, they are not the ones she wants. Rumors seep through the tower like damp. Mark Smeaton has confessed. That single sentence, once heard, changes the temperature of the room. Smeaton is not a nobleman. He is a musician, a court servant, close enough to be useful, low enough to be breakable. A confession from someone like that is a crowbar. It pries open every locked door because the court can pretend it came from truth, not coercion. Anne hears it and understands immediately what it means. Confessions create gravity. Once one man admits something, everyone else becomes suspect for denying it. The story has traction now. It rolls downhill. Then she hears that her brother, George Boleyn, has been arrested. George, brilliant and reckless, a man who carried the Boleyn name like a blade, too sharp for his own safety. The accusation of incest is not simply meant to destroy Anne. It is meant to poison the entire family line, to erase the legitimacy of anything that came from it, especially the child. Elizabeth, a daughter who is alive, who is real, who has a face and a laugh and small hands that once clung to Anne's finger. The court is not just threatening Anne's life. It is threatening the meaning of her motherhood. It is threatening to make her child a historical mistake. And there is the other rumor, the one that comes like a chill. The king is already turning his eyes elsewhere. Another woman. Another potential queen. The court's appetite for novelty is endless, but Henry's is something more dangerous, a hunger that treats people as chapters. When the chapter is finished, the page is turned. Anne is questioned. Not in one dramatic interrogation, but repeatedly, the way water wears down stone. Each time, the questions shift slightly. Names are introduced, then removed. Dates are offered, then corrected. This is not because the investigators are sloppy. It is because inconsistency is the trap. If Anne answers firmly, she risks contradicting some testimony they already have prepared. If she hesitates, they call it guilt. If she becomes emotional, they call it hysteria. If she becomes composed, they call it coldness. And there is another cruelty hidden inside this method. It forces Anne to imagine scenarios she may never have lived. It forces her mind to walk through fabricated moments, to picture herself in rooms and beds and conversations that did not happen, because she must respond to them. Over time, the mind begins to blur the border between defending against a lie and being haunted by it. This is psychological torture, disguised as procedure. In the tower, time behaves strangely. Days don't feel like days. They feel like corridors. Each one looks like the last, but not quite. Anne wakes, eats little, listens, waits. She prays, but prayer is complicated now. Prayer usually assumes a future. Prayer assumes time enough for mercy to arrive. In the tower, prayer becomes something else, a bargaining with silence. Sometimes, clergymen visit her, offering spiritual counsel in careful language. They ask her to confess, to unburden her soul. Confession, in theory, is meant to free the spirit. In this context, it can be used to seal a verdict. Anne knows that. She knows the difference between confession as salvation and confession as paperwork. She speaks of her innocence. She insists she has been wronged. But she also begins to measure her words, because she understands the terrible arithmetic of her situation. Innocence does not guarantee survival. Consistency does not guarantee survival. Only usefulness does. And she is becoming less useful by the hour. Yet even in confinement, Anne remains Anne. She notices details. She reads faces. She understands the theater around her, perhaps better than those performing it. And that awareness becomes its own agony, because to see the machinery is not to stop it. It only means you watch your death being assembled piece by piece. The trial arrives with the cold certainty of a door that has been closing for days and finally clicks shut. When Anne is brought to face judgment, she is no longer simply a woman. She is a symbol being dismantled. Those present, the peers, the officials, the observers, are not just deciding her fate. They are deciding what story England will tell itself. If Anne is guilty, then everything that happened to bring her to the throne can be framed as correction, not rupture. If Anne is guilty, then Henry's desire becomes virtue, and his reversal becomes justice. A guilty Anne makes everyone else cleaner. Anne listens to the charges. She denies them. But denial is not what the room is built to receive. The proceedings move with an unnatural speed, as if the conclusion is pulling them forward like a rope tied to the waist. Witnesses speak. Accusations stack. Dates and locations are stated with a confidence that feels rehearsed. Anne recognizes the shape of the trap. It does not need to be airtight. It only needs to be convincing enough for those who already want the outcome. That is how political trials work. They aren't about proving guilt. They are about granting permission. Permission for the king to remarry. Permission for the court to survive by aligning with the new wind. Permission for the nation to pretend this is orderly. And still, somewhere in Anne, a part refuses to fold completely. Not because she believes the world is fair, but because she knows what surrender would mean. It would mean admitting that her entire life, her choices, her ambitions, her sacrifices, was nothing but a mistake that deserves its ending. Pride is often condemned as a sin, but sometimes pride is the last piece of a person that remains theirs. In the days after the trial, something shifts. The verdict has been spoken, but the execution is delayed. Not long, history will tell you it moves fast. But in the tower, even a short delay becomes a season. This is where the title's promise becomes real. The psychological torture before the sword fell. Anne is now a condemned woman who must still wake up each morning without being told whether this is her last. She must eat without appetite. She must sleep without rest. She must look at the same walls and wonder if she will see them again tomorrow. The authorities have achieved a perfect cruelty. They have given her certainty of death without certainty of time. That uncertainty changes the body. The mind begins to lurch between preparation and denial. 1 hour she might plan her final speech, shaping it like a weapon of dignity. The next hour she might imagine a pardon arriving, a messenger at the door, the impossible reversal. People sometimes think the condemned become calm because they accept fate. Often they become calm because the mind cannot sustain terror indefinitely. It burns out, it goes numb, it floats. Anne's behavior, as reported by those around her, becomes complex. Moments of composure, moments of laughter, moments of despair. And in that complexity, you can feel the human truth beneath the legend. She is not a statue. She is a person whose nervous system is being stretched to its limit. She asks about her daughter. What will happen to Elizabeth? Will she be declared illegitimate? Will she be sent away? Will she remember her mother? There is a unique terror in knowing you will die before you can protect the child you brought into the world. Anne's enemies do not just aim at her throat. They aim at her legacy, her lineage, the very reason she endured the court's cruelty in the first place. And then comes the detail that feels almost cinematic, because it is so precise, the decision to bring a swordsman from France. In England, executions are commonly done by axe. An axe is brutal. It depends on the strength and accuracy of the executioner. A sword, wielded by a skilled man, can be cleaner, faster, almost merciful, in the way that the word mercy becomes distorted near death. Why a sword for Anne? Some say it is a last kindness from Henry, a gesture meant to soften the story. Some say it is calculated theater, a way to present the execution as dignified, controlled, almost continental. Either way, the message reaches Anne. Your death is being choreographed. Even the method has been decided. Even the blade is being chosen like a prop. And that changes the weighting again, because now the execution is no longer abstract. It has metal. It has a craftsman's edge. It is on its way. Anne's final days become a tightening circle. The tower feels smaller. The air feels heavier. Every conversation is both too intimate and too guarded. She is visited by officials, by clergy. She is told to prepare her soul. She is offered opportunities to confess, to name accomplices, to cooperate with the story that will outlive her. And here lies one of the cruelest contradictions. By cooperating, she might protect others, or she might simply feed the machine that is killing her. At night, she listens to the tower's sounds, the clink of armor, the distant murmur of men, the occasional shout from the yard. Somewhere in London, ordinary people drink ale, argue about prices, kiss their children goodnight. Anne can almost taste that normal world, and it feels like torture. One of the most haunting parts of Anne Boleyn's end is that she remains astonishingly lucid. She knows she is being watched. She knows her final words will be recorded, repeated, and turned into proof. She knows she cannot speak honestly about Henry without endangering those she loves, including her child. Even now she must manage power. So she prepares a performance of dignity. Not because it is false, but because it is the last thing she controls. Her voice, her posture, her words. Beneath it, she is still human, still frightened. She asks practical questions. How will it happen? Will it hurt? Asking does not bring comfort, but it brings shape to fear. The morning arrives without drama. Light filters in. The tower wakes. Anne dresses, knowing even her clothing will be remembered and judged. She is led out into open space, into faces that cannot save her. She speaks carefully. She does not accuse. She frames the king as just. It is strategy, and it is protection. Then she kneels. The crowd falls silent. The ritual begins. The blade falls quickly. That is the final cruelty. The waiting was the long death.